Hi, it's the Lean Into Artcast, the Lean Into Artcast show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take a walk around a topic, try to look at it from every conceivable angle, think about it in the abstract, really think hard on it, and then try to use all that thinking to turn it into some kind of actionable items, something to do with all this thinking that we do. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd, cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
I am Rob Stenzinger. I am a designer, coder, facilitator, and wow, Jerzy, how you doing? I don't know, just wow.
Wow, here we are again.
I know. Lean Into Artcast number 154. Yes.
154. When will it end? When will you make it end? When I am finished. So yeah, this episode we're going to talk about service-minded approach. You know, making things, doing things, and participating in things with a bias toward how can I help. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame it. I think it's maybe, yeah. I mean, it might be the most simple way to think about that because, yeah, being service-minded means that it has your involvement, yet it's to provide something, and that involves someone else. So I like that. How can I help?
Yes.
Sums that up pretty concisely.
How can I help also means, oh, what just happened to I think my computer just crashed. My computer with the screens. No, it didn't.
You're here.
Oh.
We're here.
I'm here, but my my secondary computer just like did some kind of funny going to sleep thing.
I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay, but my second computer's not okay.
That is exactly true. Holy cow. Well, that was going to be my second screen to pull up our advertisements in a minute. So we're just going to have to talk through them, I think.
We can hand wave. That's okay.
Okay. I feel my ears getting hot, Rob. What just happened? I hope my computer didn't die. Okay. That's good drama for the podcast.
It is good drama. Did Jerzy's computer die? We don't know. We'll
find
up.
out in the second half of the show.
We'll find out.
As I monkey with it over and over again while we talk. But yes, how can I help? Also, this is like in the attempt to frame things up. It implies a relationship, and it is not. It implies like sort of a loop between you and other people, right? And it's not just what's in it for me or what's in it for them. It's what's in it for us. But how can I assist to start this cycle going, right? Things change once we start asking the question, how can I help? But before we go into that, before we go into our topic, we've got to do, we got advertisers, Rob.
We do have advertisers. Those advertisers happen to be you and I. And
I wonder if I could do a screen share while you talk through this real quick. I can try to
possibly
share my screen, so.
Cool. This podcast is drawn from. I mean, sometimes we have guests. It's drawn from the experience of Jerzy and I, and a lot of times it's mining different things that we're dealing with or wanting to get more intentional and mindful and skillful about, and use our whole process that Jerzy described seconds ago. But like to make the podcast happen, we have other projects that we use. And some are tightly related, such as the workshops at leanintoart.com. If you go to leanintoart.com/workshops, you'll get something that is very very likely familiar in its feeling, because it involves the kind of sharing of information and exploration style that Jerzy has and that I have in our own different flavors of that. And you'll find things like Jerzy's workshops, like Comics Fundamentals, which is multiple sort of learning modules, sessions, if you will, that build up sort of a complete soup to nuts understanding of exploring a set of creating a set of characters and making some worlds, and then building a narrative around them in the language of comics. Also Fatam, which is awesome, and it's like you've got the super duper huge passion of Jerzy, where exploring the sound design of comics, and this is his workshop about that. You've got some by me as well, such as using your skills you already have as a storyteller to explore how you present your comics in an interactive context, and that's called Storyteller's UI Tools. and or storytelling to make your comics UI awesome. And things like turning jokes into comics, Laughing Yeti Monkey Spaghetti. That's about, just exploring those kind of funny moments and looking for the twist in there. And then making video games from comics. So those are at leanintoart.com/workshops. Also, you have things like A2CAF. And instead of that, sure. There we go, A2CAF. Yeah.
All right. So yes, if we're talking about Boulder and Fleet this time, another thing that I'm heavily involved in, and Rob is heavily involved in, is the Ann Arbor Comic Arts Festival coming up June 18th and 19th, 2016. And I want to point people at the programming page on a2caf.com.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the very first programs, first of all, well, I should point people at Incubate. We'll talk about Incubate in a second. But the first thing I want to point people at, that'll be the people who are interested in this show, people who are interested in the stuff that Rob and I make, will want to look at Saturday, June 18th, from 12 noon to 2 p.m. What do we have here, Rob? The Raspberry Pi Gumption Lab. Make game code, art, and sound.
Yeah, game gumption. And this is about how, all right, so if you don't know about making games, but you're curious, and you don't know about the Raspberry Pi, but you're curious, or you're like, well, I don't know what that is. I'm going to eat and make games. Nope. This is actually, so the Raspberry Pi is a super inexpensive but general purpose computer put out by, there's a, I think through the educational system in the United Kingdom, something like that. But now it's purchasable throughout the world. It's like roughly $30 to essentially have a, it's not your monitor and every other piece, but you can hook it up to a TV, what have you. And all of a sudden you've got this full multi-purpose real computer that has these amazing things that just sort of come with the installation of its operating system called Raspbian. And we'll be exploring like how to make sounds and fun, music stuff with Sonic Pi, and also gaming and art. So code and art with a program called Scratch, and it's just super approachable and meant to be a fun exploration of that, and how it's not like this big scary hard to approach thing. So it's that's gonna be lots of fun.
And we're going to have a lot of really awesome cartoonist guests at this thing. C.C. Bell, author of El Defo, Tom Engelberger, author of the Strange Case of Origami Yoda series and the recently released Rocket and Groot Stranded on Planet Strip Mall, Kazu Kibuishi, author of the Amulet series, Nathan Hale of the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales series, Ben Hatke of Zeta the Space Girl, Zach Giolongo, of Broxo, also the Galaxy of Super Adventure, and Rob, and me, June 18th, 19th, and then the other thing, June 17th, and I really encourage people who participate or who listen to the show who are going to be in the Southeast Michigan area that weekend to check out A2 Incubate. That is Friday, June 17th, 2016. We're having an unconference before the convention. And what it is it's a bunch of educators, librarians, and cartoonists and designers all getting together to work together to try to figure out how to better work together. So it's got some unconferencey kind of things where we, brainstorm a bunch of topics that are bugging us about, like, well, why can't we do this? Or wouldn't it be great if we did that? But then in the afternoon, check this out. 2 to 4 p.m., we got the Secret Lab hands-on sessions. That's at the Ann Arbor District Library. There's going to be a screen printing rig set up, letterpress, and also 3D printing set up. And there's going to be hands-on demos where you can get your hands dirty using this stuff. If you ever wanted to try screen printing with somebody who actually knows how to do it, this is your chance to do that. We're going to conclude the day conclude the afternoon with Super Electronic Comics Challenge, where we're going to make a comic with electronic elements. So you make a comic that has conductive ink and tape to create sort of events on the page, right? So it's not just about making a 6-panel comic, like that's hard enough, but now we got to make one that interacts with itself in an electronic way. So when you close the battery on it, right? So there'll be a battery that closes the electronic loop. You make that battery closing an event in the comic, and then also creates a separate event in another panel, right? So that'll be part of the challenge that we'll do for the final hour. And then after that, we're going to all hustle over to the Ann Arbor Art Center just down the street, and there is the opening reception for the Comics Unbound art exhibition, which I co-curated with my wife. Rob is in it. A bunch of great artists are in it. And at the opening reception, there will be light refreshments and adult refreshments, and there will be a giant wall street side where all of us cartoonists get together and draw all over it together, make a giant jam comic kind of thing. And registration page is at a2caf.com/incubate. The whole weekend is free. So even though, so there's an advertiser, you're trying to get me to buy something. No, we're not. We're just trying to get you to come to Michigan and hang out with cartoonists that weekend.
And I have to say, like, this event is worth so much that it's so funny. Like, that price tag might confuse you. Your psychology might say, it's free? Maybe I'll pencil it in. No, really. The experience that you will get by taking part in any portion of it is immensely valuable. And it will be one of the things that you remember that you were incredibly happy you did in the year to come.
Oh, wow. That is a high endorsement, Rob. Thank you. But, I mean, that's no small part because of the amazing people that we get to come to this thing. I mean, it's like guys like you, guys like Zach G. Longo, who really pour their guts into, like, creating a real, like, helping to create a real experience. Like, all I feel like I do is just create a scaffolding for you guys to, like, plug into and really create awesome experiences at. So, no, hats off to you guys. But
you're
yeah.
like the architect in the Matrix, which is very important.
Does that mean I can do slow motion stuff? Did the architect do that?
You look strangely like Colonel Sanders and know a lot. Those are the two things that I remember about the architect. Sorry about that. But also to have constructed such a framework with which amazing things can happen.
It's fun. And it's just a big excuse for me to hang out with all my favorite thinkers and doers. So, yeah, a2caf.com. But then there's one more thing we got to talk about quick. Rob, you make a game. You said you are a coder, designer, and facilitator. One of the things you do is coding. What did you code?
Oh, yeah. Well, I made this game recently, in the last year, called This Panda Needs You. And the idea behind it, it's you will be stacking blocks in a way that sort of match patterns, and you're helping this little panda that shows up and sees a stack of blocks. A cloud comes along and knocks them down, and your challenge is to, like, put them back together. It starts out easy enough, and there's plenty of ramp up, but eventually you're going to be dealing with, like, lots of difficult trade-offs that will be, well, where do I set this stuff while I try to put these other things back together, and how do I get this back in order and whatnot. So it's a game of stacking blocks. And you can learn more about it at this-panda.com, and it's available for iPhone and iPad.
iOS store. Okay, cool. Well, it looks like my secondary computer, my Surface, which I use for those screenshots, is back up and running. Thank you, Rob, for taking the wheel while I got everything running again.
No problem.
There's that little bit of drama solved. What bit of drama is next? Well, now we got to fly 10,000 feet up, and for that, I think I'll play some uplifting music. Thinking about the topic in abstract, looking at it from every conceivable angle, trying to figure out what hidden dimensions and depths are in this topic. How can we think really hard on it before we move on to doing stuff with it? So, surface-minded approach, Rob. Where do you want to start?
So you mentioned helping. And, well, why is that sort of the one of the ways to easily summarize this whole thing of being service minded when you're doing a thing, and also the service itself. So what do you mean making art as a service? Like, I'm just making stuff, right?
Right. And I'm supposed to make what I'm interested in. It's supposed to come from inside me, right? Like they say, like, write what you know, write what you want to write for the younger you. However, I would say that's the beginning of the thought of a service-minded approach. The moment you say you're writing for a younger you, you're not writing for you anymore. You're writing for a construct that you're making based on your life experiences. And I would say that my younger me that I'm constantly writing for couldn't possibly be the real younger me, A, because time is weird and we're temporal beings, and I exist now, and that other person existed in a different time, but also because experience and memory are not reliable, right? I'm probably putting my own personal biases and worldview my current ones onto that construct, right? So it gets a little bit tricky and messy. But for all intents and purposes, we could say that it's a construct. It's not the real younger me, but it's the beginning, I think, of thinking outside of pure self-satisfaction toward serving somebody else.
Why is that a good thing, though? Like,
why is that a good thing?
Because being satisfied sounds fine to me.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. I made a thing, and all of a sudden I well up with some kind of sense of accomplishment.
I've caught your identity disc, and I'm spinning around and throwing it back at you, and it's glowing blue, and I say, have you ever made something, can you honestly say you've ever made something purely just for you? And if you did, follow-up question is, characterize that sense of satisfaction.
Have I made something just for me? Yeah.
Like it didn't matter if anybody ever saw it.
And yes.
Okay.
Like that is often some kind of like meditative set of motion or act, or like essentially doodling, and where I'm not really involved, like interested in a particular outcome with a thing.
Okay.
And because I noticed, like, for instance, I was doing some drawing to just sort of wind down, and I finished, or I made some progress on like a digital painting sketch kind of thing, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm still wired up. My brain's like really going. I feel like going. Well, then I just sort of, all right, I started a new image, and then I just started playing. Right. And all of a sudden my heart rate slowed down, and I was like, yeah, this is relaxing. And so that was just for me. That relaxing, goofy doodle, whatever came out. It's abstract. There's no point to it. There's likely nothing that, other than like, there's no point to it for others. For me, I really enjoyed relaxing and doodling. But so to me that feels like it was really just for me.
Okay.
And I think maybe by saying that it implies that I probably have less of a chance of accomplishing something that other people would value if I'm just doing it for me. I don't know.
What do you mean?
I don't know if that's always true. Like, maybe someone would find that doodle pleasing.
Yeah.
But it would be incidental to me.
I see. Yes, in this case, the actual artifact is less important than the experience.
Yeah. Yes.
In that particular instance. Yeah.
How about you? What could you say that exists?
Sure. Yeah. There's like, and it's the same kind of thing where it's like, warm up, cool down. I do share my warm-ups and cooldowns occasionally when they particularly strike me as like the artifact is good. The artifact is worthy of showing to somebody else, but a lot of time the artifact is not. But yeah, I do feel like there's like a temptation, at least for me, to start sort of like leveraging around a bunch of like moral kind of attitudes about like, well, if you're not helping people, then you're not doing good, and doing something for your own pleasure is bad. You just pointed out how there's like a really intrinsic value to doing something purely for your own pleasure. That almost like that, if we were to make a spectrum, that would fall really towards self-care, what you described, that experience.
I think that there is a difficult, but there are potentially difficult things depending on your medium, right? So, for instance, I recently embarked on sort of a like a mini hackathon to work on some game design stuff, and
I should pull up your Instagram so you can see all those Post-its.
Partway through that experience, I wrote some journal entry that had something to do with sometimes my game design feels like a very self-indulgent guitar solo, right? Where I'm digging this, and I might be going needly, needly, doodly, wee wee, and
there it is.
I don't know if anyone else is digging this, but like I'm really into this. So that feels like a kind of indulgence, but like so is a vacation, maybe. So is whatever. I mean, so like maybe it's out like that is a form of self-care. And so I think it depends on the kind of the trade-offs. All of a sudden can seem difficult when you think like, well, I've got this idea, I've got this urge, but to follow up on it, I need to spend 2 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours, depending on the assumption, right? Mm-hmm. And the urge. And like exploring like a video game design is definitely further along the amount of hours it takes to, depending on where you want to go with that. So it definitely, I hit this threshold of like, wow, this is indulgent. Yes.
Also, I mean, most things we make, I would say probably most of the time, we make things to be interacted with. Like, you don't make a game just for you, right? You can, but there's a lot. When you talk about making a video game, there's a lot of effort that's going into something. And then I would also argue this, that the moment you let other people interact with it is the moment you start getting interesting feedback on how to make it express your idea more clearly, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it depends on the distance between when you start that idea and when all of a sudden people are interacting with it, because that's starting to close the loop where now it might start feeling service-minded. Before that, it can feel, you're indulging your own assumption.
Yeah.
So I guess it's painting a contrast for the service-minded to think about what might feel less service-minded.
Right.
Even though
I think that's great.
It may end up that way.
Right. We're not placing any value judgment on that exactly in this particular discussion. We're just like looking at one side of it. And I would say, for purposes of further contrast, episode 145, which I've got right here, I'll pull that up, which, strangely enough, it was mostly about printing comics. We did an episode, Printing Your Comics. And in it, we sort of came up with a rubric of examining what problems does this solve for your audience, what problems does this solve for you, right? So there's a perfect example of like, okay, there's the service to think about, and then there's the, benefits to yourself to think about, right? And not that they're mutually exclusive, but...
No, they're totally not. I mean, you're essentially gathering criteria to be considered as you are constructing the thing. And a lot of times we call that, design criteria, design constraints.
Well, and that's something that you put in the notes with people are a fantastic source of design constraints. And one of the things that I know I've been talking about this for years is writing for a specific audience that I define. It helps focus my laser, right? So like it benefits me to think about who is this thing for? Who am I making this for? Even if I'm making up a person, by having that as sort of my target to aim all my ideas at, it helps me pare out anything that I don't need to get to that end goal, right? So it benefits me too to try to benefit somebody else, right?
It really does. And so when user experience calls that a persona. It's a design. So what sort of things do you bucket in there? Like when you think of that conceptual person or particular person?
Right. Okay. I'll think about underserved audiences, right?
Okay.
I'll think about and it can be very broad when I say that. Like I'll think of, like, for instance, who am I writing Boulder and Fleet for? I'm writing Boulder and Fleet for that kid who lives in a tough community, whether it's urban or rural, where might makes right is sort of the law of the land and the playground sometimes, right? Those kids need to be presented with an option, right? That's what I'm writing for. I'm writing for that kid who's scared, who thinks that fighting is really scary, and they don't know why. Is there something wrong with them that it's so scary? I'm writing a story to help that kid see that, no, you know what? Fighting is terrible, and that you can be really strong and still not do it, right? That's my persona that I'm writing for. Notice I didn't say anything about gender. I didn't say anything about race. I'm talking about a condition, a situation. Other times,
so I agree. Like what you're describing. So gender and all that stuff. I think is less informative than behaviors and
Yeah.
other sort of frictions that those people would, like, whoever you're considering as, like, I want to reach that audience. And I think it's more beneficial for shaping or informing a project because you can measure a behavior. You can think, well, did I accomplish something that would be more accessible for people of all different abilities, or did I hit story points that really embody a different perspective for someone experiencing, what you described, like that you can evaluate what you make based on that.
Right, right, yeah, yeah, and the project I'm involved with, the Captain Seriously and the Supermaster Sentinels, that's very. They have people actually doing research work on it and evaluating the impact that it's making, and in those cases, or in that project, every new book I make is for another successive grade year, right? So I started in second grade, now I'm working on the eighth grade book, and each year I sit down with educators and with the school principal and the people from the Seriously Coalition, and we say, okay, what kind of things are kids dealing with at this grade? What are the things that are being said in the classroom? What are the things they're experiencing on the playground? What are the things that they're experiencing throughout the year in terms of like field trips, right? We look at everything that's going on in their lives and sort of just take a broad look at it and sort of come up with, okay, here are the problems we anticipate them having or that they've reported having in years past. That's why you have the educators there, right? These are the things that we're dealing with our kids. How can, okay, Jerzy, build a story that service that delivers that message and provides the service to those kids, in that you're entertaining them, you're making them feel safe while you help them negotiate with these difficult issues.
Yeah, stories are pretty awesome for serving that kind of need.
I think so.
Yeah. Some might say comics are great. First time I've used that. Anyway, it's so no. Part of me is I got some nerding bubbling happening.
Let's
So
hit it.
are
We're
they
supposed to think hard in
publishing
this
this
section.
this research? This sounds completely awesome. I'm fascinated and curious.
What do you mean?
Is this
you want me to-
research by the Seriously the team being published at all?
I am not sure. I will have
No
to check with
value
them on that.
judgment either way. I'm just curious.
No.
Like, wouldn't this be interesting to explore?
Well, I know that the research that's being done is part of an ongoing effort to make this thing replicable, right? And they've already started doing work in that regard. So, like, we've already started doing for the past 5 years. I've been doing books specifically for Chelsea, Michigan, but I just redid 6 of the books for 2 other towns. So Stockbridge, Michigan, and Dexter, Michigan now have the books with, like, where I update the art with local landmarks and local students, right? So they choose students from the classes who are sort of exemplary leaders in the coalition, right? They participate in a lot of events. They extol a lot of the kinds of attitudes and virtues that we're trying to promote. So they appear in the comics as people who assist the
Whoa.
heroes.
I did not know this dimension earlier. Wow.
Oh yeah. So
Huh.
you're in 4th grade. You get this comic. Your friends are in it, and there's all these local landmarks. Like, oh, they're going to that place that I go to, right? Yeah. So like it really drives home the sense that this is specifically for you. We made this for you because your community cares about you, right? That kind of thing. Yeah.
What an awesome project. That sounds
Seriously,
very
is going to be at
interesting.
A2CAF. They're going to have a table at A2CAF, so you'll get to meet. Actually, we're talking about having some of the kids who have drawn comics for Seriously tabling at A2CAF.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's
they're
awesome.
it's a really cool thing they're doing. So, but it's very service minded, right? I mean, it's
Good point. They clearly have criteria outside of sort of a personal sensibility. It's more like, well, if you only are doing something based on like your idea, then it may not need a feedback loop. You can just do your idea, And inherently, I mean, it sounds like they're doing research,
Yeah.
and they're iterating, which means they'll gain more perspective by observing how, well, depending on the observations they captured initially, like they'll get to see the difference.
Totally.
Yep. Inherently, very, like if you're doing anything that feels researchy, probably service minded.
Yeah, and every question that we ask ourselves is always like, how does this help the kids? Like whenever we make any kind of decision, like the fact check that we throw in there, the way to check our power in this situation is to say, like, how does this help children? And if we can't answer that right away, then boom, gets thrown out. Now, this is a design constraint that helps in storytelling. It's like I've told the story 100 times, like when I was sitting down with a writing partner on a book back, this is like 10, 15 years ago, and I was explaining this joke that I wanted to put in the book. I wanted it so bad, and I was really hung up on it because it made this deep-cut Transformers reference, and me and 3 other Transformers fans would get it, but it doesn't really figure into the story that much, but it's really funny. And my writing partner said, well, what's our story about? And I was like, well, it's about this. And he said, now what does your joke have to do with that? I'm like, oh, crap. And I realized that, I had to go.
Yeah.
That's how you do that, yeah.
That's a really, okay. So, yet your idea, did you end up expressing it anywhere else, or just,
Oh, yeah,
moving on,
I
or-
wound up
okay.
finding a place for it in other places, so.
Okay.
None of that stuff, I'm too lazy to let any of my ideas rot in the ground. Everything's going to get used and cannibalized and reused,
But well, interesting. I mean, so it came up as relevant enough eventually.
Right, yeah. It was
Cool.
it was a funny joke, so I just used it someplace else.
All right. What so service minded.
Well, I want to go the other way. I want to go the other
Okay.
way a little bit.
Not service-minded.
We kind of made this case for what does it look like to not be service-minded? Let's go into the case of what I consider to be some of the dark edge of being too service-minded. And I'm
Ooh.
guilty of this. It's not about me. It's about the thing. Don't look at me. Look at the thing. Right? I'm here to help. I'm not here to get any of the benefit. Is that what being service-minded is? Like you have to vanish?
That
You have
is
to walk off into the sunset at the end of every episode and never get any of the benefits?
exactly just like Kane and Kung Fu. No,
Romantic idea.
it is. There is a romance to that. There's romance everywhere. Darn it! What's going on here? There's romance to just doing your thing. There's romance to being, service minded. There's romance to being super service minded. Wow.
I was talking about this on this Galaxy Super Adventure podcast, and Ben Hatke was talking about how he loves the superhero with the secret identity that can't tell anybody because they have to do all this hard work and undergo all this sacrifice, and nobody can know. And they sit in the rain, and they're like, "Oh, all this pain is just mine," And he's like, "That there's something really romantic about that idea." And to which I threw him like, "Ooh," as somebody who's been very seduced by that story. There's like a fine line between that and martyrdom, and I try to be super, super careful about that.
There really is. Yeah. Okay. So why? I mean, wait a minute. You're saying like how could that kind of selflessness lead to undesired outcomes?
Because if you don't get any of the credit, then people who reap the benefits don't know that you're a resource to be used again. Right? They don't call on you. They don't ask for your help because they didn't know you did anything. And there's something wonderful and beautiful and Taoist about the idea of if you do it right, nobody's really sure you did anything. That's lovely. But if you want to engage in, let's go to Rob's coat of arms, everybody. To do, how does it go? Do work that.
Well, okay. So the classic, the durable version of it that's easily rememberable is I seek to do what I love for a community that I care about, using tools and methods I believe in to engage in a sustainable trade.
Underline in black crayon that last part. To engage or to sustainable trade.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to have sustainable trade if nobody knows what value you bring to the thing.
Yeah. to engage in a sustainable trade, that sentence is it's missing the phrase "so that I can engage in." It's like you exist, and that does matter.
Yeah.
It's and as a collective sort of organism, it's actually when you're serving a tribe, it's helpful if they remember your service, and it's actually convenient and accessible and usable. So you can think of terms and criteria that are outside of your own selfish needs that benefit other people by making it easy to remember you. I may as well point out some quirk that I had earlier in my career. Like, so when I made, and when I was, let's say, when I was trying to convince people and help advocate and educate about a thing I made, and I was in a certain few, a long time ago, big corporate environment thing, and I didn't put my name on anything. And I just let the stuff exist on its own. And it had an impact, but like there was a cost for not putting my name on stuff. And that cost is sort of confusion. And and that confusion adds enough puzzling and enough friction to like, well, now what do I do? As someone who like recognizes this of being benefit, like, okay, great, you convinced me. I'm ready to call who now? That drops the ball on
Right.
being of service.
Right. Here's a perfect example. And this is like a really hard knocks real world one where it's not me moralizing, it's me just stating facts. In 2004, I was working on a rather large client account for an ad agency where, I mean, it was like there was enough work coming in that this was enough to make me be able to quit my day job, right? Like wife and I were moving, like, well, let's just move. I don't have to worry about looking for a job. I've got this gig. And like the short version of this long story is that like the ad agency folded, and then I lost the gig, and I got into like serious financial trouble. I'm fine now, but the agent or the client really liked my work, but because it was work for hire and my name was never signed on anything that they saw. They got the work, they got the artwork, but they never knew who did it because the agency was the intermediary. Fast forward like 5 months after that agency folded, I thought out of an act of desperation, like, well, I guess I can contact that client directly, and maybe they don't want me, maybe they do, I don't know, maybe they've moved on, but it's worth reaching out to them. And I emailed them, and they emailed me back saying, "You're the guy? Oh my God, we've been trying to find out who you are," because we got all this work. And for the next 2 years, I had a lot of good paying work again because they didn't know who I was, and they couldn't engage in that value exchange where I provided them with stuff that they wanted and they gave me money to keep living on. So hiding behind the thing can be dangerous. I think it's a noble thing to say, like, I'm just glad I could help, but I also think that people should know that you did the help.
Yeah, I mean, I hope everyone plans on sticking around to keep helping, and so inherently, it's great to know that you helped.
Yeah.
And I say that to my past self,
That persona.
as much as I'm saying it to the rest of us. Interesting. So that you do point out a weird, like an asterisk moment where it's almost sort of a conundrum where sometimes a contract can cause you to do that, where it's like, no, it's our product, not you.
Right.
And you can't say you did this.
And
I've done a lot of work like this, actually.
well, and one of the things it's made me aware of, I'm a little bit more conscious of, and this is like, maybe this is even on the ground stuff, but like when I'm talking contracts now, I try to make sure that all parties are aware of what my contribution is. Even if the public doesn't know, like, okay, don't put my name on it. I don't care. But all the parties through which money is going to flow are going to know what I did exactly, well, how much value I brought to this thing. and I'm not going to soft paddle that. And I'm not going to be a jerk about it either. I'm just going to be very clear. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is the value I'm bringing, and this is the value that's going to be exchanged as a result of that, right?
That's a really good twist on that whole approach.
Yeah, it just made me a lot more aware of that. So, I mean, like, almost going broke will do that. Nothing focuses the mind like the hangman's noose, as they say.
And there's so many hangmen out there. You know?
There's a lot of them. Is it time to go on the ground? Is there any other hard thinking we need to do in this section before?
I think, yeah. I mean, let's go on the ground. That this was a good exploration of sort of a little bit of what and why.
Okay, so in 1 minute and 30 seconds, we are going to answer the question, because like this is all sort of raises a question. How do you even know who you're trying to help? We talked about a bunch of different instances where that came from outside or that came from within, but how do you identify, how do you look for it, how do you know who you're trying to help? Does it happen at the outset? Does it happen midway? Does it happen at the end? How do you know? We're going to talk about some of the ways we think about it in 1 minute and 30 seconds. But until then, we need to talk about this other thing that we do called Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart is where you can find it. And what is it? It is a way for you to be able to support the show. If you listen to the show every episode and you're like, wow, this provides a lot of value to me, it's great to have it going on in the background. I love the way Jerzy and Rob sort of chew on these ideas and sort of refine them into some kind of actionable items. Or even if you just like the way we joke around with each other, I hope you will consider going to patreon.com/leanintoart. You can contribute as little as $1 a month and $1 for those who don't live in the United States. And what that will do is that will help make the show more sustainable, help us, it'll pay us for our time and help us get more resources to be able to do the show as good as we can, and maybe even do more interesting things with it. And I do want to take this moment to thank 5 of our Patreon supporters who have been so kind as to, help make the show more sustainable by providing us with financial support. And the first one I want to thank is D. Jusan at DEEJUUSAN. There's a terrific comic called Gray Is. Fabulous manga artist. You won't be sorry if you follow her. We Are LA Tech. And it's at We Are LA Tech on Twitter. These are Twitter handles I'm throwing out, by the way. So DE Jusan, JUUSAN. And then
by the way, yeah, I think they are essentially like a community for like startups in LA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So thank you, We Are LA Tech, for supporting us on Patreon. And you can go follow them on Twitter at We Are LA Tech. Retro Auto, I believe this is our old friend, Control Alt Lee, CTRLALTL. So it's Control Alt, it says Elite, Control Alt Lee on Twitter. Rachel Ross at, how would I say this? NYC Terrace, TERIS. NYC TERIS. And then, of course, Owen Jolens at Comic Colorist, COMIC COLORIST, a professional comic colorist and also excellent thinker. And we thank everybody for their support on Patreon. And we hope that if you are listening and you are not a supporter, you will consider doing so. Now, Rob, ready to go on the ground?
Totally ready, I think.
Going back to the classics. This heavy weighted music that bring us down. This is like going through the atmosphere, right? All that fire's licking up around the Zentradi ship. And stops. And then Chiron says something very obnoxious, like, "Oh, I hate you so much."
I didn't know you knew.
I'm going to destroy the SDF-1.
No way.
What?
That's awesome. Chiron impersonation.
Maybe that'll be a character on Galaxy of Super Adventure.
Oh my God, that's great.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it anyway. Maybe that'll be another Patreon feature that we roll out where Chiron will personally thank them.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. Not to like increase scope or be unsustainable about this, about our service-minded approach to our Patreon experience, but like, I don't know. Interesting idea. Let's hold on to that one.
All right. So okay, on the ground. It's time to stop thinking about stuff so hard. It's time to start doing stuff. So what are we doing? How do you, Rob,
Mm.
identify these personas? Do you make them up? Do you pull them from your life? Do you and where do they appear? Are they do you start a project by saying like I want to make a project to serve this person, or is it something where this is a neat thing I'm making? I wonder who it's for, and then you find that out on the way.
So I think there's a lot of a lot of potential for like distraction and things that don't really contribute to benefiting the design or informing what you're making. When you do like sort of surface level attributes, it's like, oh, they live in, you know, Perth, Australia. They live in whatever, you know, New Orleans, Louisiana, whatever. Who cares, right? What do they do? What do they do? What behavior can you observe? And I think that's a helpful catalyst to base a persona. Like, what behavior are you serving? And now you can know, and you can meet that behavior with your design and see if it's fit or not for being of service to that behavior.
You give me let's fire through like some examples of a behavior that you can observe.
Okay, so a behavior that you can observe. Let's see. Trying to think of something.
Teenagers who work in fast food restaurants.
Okay. Teenage. So that's nope. That's a nice brainstorm, good workshopping, and we put that on the board for food for thought.
Why was that not good?
Because what we would want to think is like, okay, so is there some behavior that they have that group? So let's say they work in they have short breaks. They have short breaks, yet they do have a device that they do check the internet regularly, right? So you want to make sure that you have something bite-sized and shareable, or you want to make sure you have something that will be remembered to explore later if it's not bite-sized, right? That kind of thing. So the behavior would be, I can look at this on my break. The behavior would be, I will remember to look at this later, for instance, in that example.
Okay, so like people who only remember that they have a to-do item when they're in a place where it's inconvenient to write down a to-do item. Would that be it?
Interesting, but yeah, a very interesting one. Yep. So now, like, what kind of, how could you design around that?
Right. Yeah. Like,
Yep.
I'm in the shower. This is not the place to be adding to my emergent task planner. It's like, oh, that's right. I got that thing.
Yeah.
And then
it's
so
pretty inconvenient.
Yeah, very inconvenient. The behaviors. Would it be? What about people who binge eat at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yep.
Is that a behavior?
That's a behavior. Exactly. So you're not saying like, oh, millennials, Gen Xers, boomers that live in a certain place, that whatever. That's demographics. That's not behavior. Those are two different things. I think you can design for behavior far more conveniently, far more focused, and then distracted by your assumptions about a certain population, right? Get that stuff out of your head about the population. That's my emphatic bias.
Okay, but we just spent all this time like congratulating the Seriously Coalition for saying like, let's make a book for fourth graders.
True. I am under the assumption that their criteria for saying a book for fourth graders involves more of the circumstance of being in fourth grade and the experience and observable phenomenon that they know is involved in populations in that age range. And I think
that was the clarification I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there was a drilling down after that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a question of what are these kids going through, and then the teachers would say, these are the things that we have experienced the kids are going through. These are situations, and this is stuff that's in the curriculum at this time.
So, for instance, maybe you start with a population, and you're like, hey, I'm a fourth grade teacher, and there's this group the seriously, I'm totally making this up by right now, but using some real real components of the example. And like, let's say I'm part of the whole Captain Seriously team, and I'm like, okay, teachers, tell me about some pain points you've observed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look for some highs and lows, that's not a bad signal to then go explore, right? But so you've essentially used the demographic as a way to then sort of dig up behaviors and something that you can serve.
Okay.
But you can't stop at the whole demographic.
Right, right. Yeah, now that I think about it, when my decision to put Boulder and Fleet on Instagram and Tumblr specifically was born out of the idea of not that I was going to find my audience there, my audience being ostensibly 12-year-old kids, but that there are active image sharers there. People there find images they like and they pass them around, right?
Yeah.
That is an activity that I want to have happen with my comic.
Exactly. And now you can look at those activities as how do they relate, how do those behaviors relate to your service? Like your service is all of a sudden, that's the thing that you want to provide. And now you can have like this beneficial mapping and planning that like, how do these things relate? And all of a sudden those relations are things that you can go explore and try and test.
All right, so now I get to be devil's advocate. And I go, all right, well, I noticed that this one got passed around a lot. And I noticed that this one had 3 panels, a lot of face shots, and I tagged it thusly. I used these kind of tags on it. Which data point do I follow? Oh, and there was a predominance of pink and purple on this one compared to other ones. Like I put all my comics pages on a grid, and I did a squint test, and I'm like, okay, more so than any of the other ones, this one has pink and purple. Which of those data points do I listen to?
Let's see. All of them. None of them. It's a multivariable problem, which is one of the things that we are pretty bad at as people. Yeah. So if you can reduce that, and now you can start to test certain pieces. Yeah. Right. So like get it down to one variable or less.
Variable I'm going to test.
Yeah. Test one at a time.
Time of day.
So many. Oh my gosh. Yes. You look at this. Like, so you're like, well, what was the content, right? What was the overall message? Like, how did I convey that message? What was the aesthetics I used to convey this message? Where did I convey this message? What is the signal I'm listening to observe that this message was, enjoyed or used or whatever? So like all this stuff can like, both in like the thing itself and then in the signal you listen to about the thing, it all can help inform like what became of it. How did it turn out? What was the outcome? And the problem is that there's a lot of variables in the outcome to be just sort of, quick and easy and flippant about it.
So it sounds like I'm never off the hook on this.
Yeah. I meant to break it to you gently. But now that we're here,
yeah. So is this a place to go into tools that you use to collect all these kinds of things?
Well,
or is there someplace else you want to go with that?
I think it would be interesting to go divergent. Like, let's go from a completely different perspective. Let's go from like where you think of. And yeah, let's go,
okay.
Yeah.
We'll pitch the badminton birdie back and forth.
Please.
Yeah, so a place that I like to start with is anti-lessons, and I think of like how are this particular group of people not being served? Group meaning people who are exhibiting these kinds of behaviors. So in the case of like, let's talk about A2CAF, which I'm one of the co-organizers of, so I can only speak to my involvement in a big group of people. Started out as 4, but now there's a lot of people involved in putting this thing together. Thank God. But in the early days when we were sort of like figuring out what this thing was, I was thinking, okay, well, who are we trying to serve? We're trying to serve people who go to comics festivals, right? And specifically, people go to comics festivals looking for stuff for their family, right? People who want something that the whole family can enjoy at a comics festival or comic convention, right? And so I thought about what are the ways in which they're not being helped, right? Okay, well, they go to these things and there's like, there's not very good, at some shows there wasn't very good navigation between what is the all ages, family-friendly stuff and the stuff that's clearly meant for adults only, right? So like you have like the kids comics table here right next to the guy who has like these borderline pornographic photographs, right? So you literally had parents covering their kids' eyes as they walked by, kind of thing. Okay, well, I'm going to make note of these kinds of things, and things that I hear from people, things that people say, like, oh, I went to this show and it was weird because of this. I went to this show because, and I had a bad time at the show because the convention organizers weren't very nice to me. They were very impatient and they seemed kind of beleaguered and frustrated and they snapped at me about some stuff and I just wanted, I was just asking them where the drinking fountain was or something. Okay, make a note of that. It's important for the people who are participating in this thing to feel welcome. How do we do that, right? So sometimes I'll start with anti-lessons, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad place to start, but it's an emotional place. It's a place that it's a pain point, right? It's like, ow, it stings when I do that. How do I make it not sting when I do that next time? But it's not the full exploration of the thing. The full exploration of the thing happens later, right?
So there's a lot of commonality in sort of what you laid out and what you were evaluating. So you're looking at behavior over the course of a journey for a particular persona, right? So like how does that turn out? And then like through that, where are their pain points? And then those become things that are now considerations for what you make. Like well, you know what? I really want to serve that. And now I know how to have some kind of feedback on my service because am I living up to that? Am I not? How's that going? And the other really cool thing that you mentioned in the whole that whole dynamic is that it's not just one persona. Like you've got multiple in there that you're looking to shape and you're looking to create a successful experience or journey for multiple kinds of behaviors, right?
Right. Because we're also talking about. See, this is the place of special privilege that I occupy. Is that as a cartoonist who has been to comic conventions, as a convention organizer, I get to represent the cartoonists coming too. I have experienced firsthand some of those pain points, and I remember, and I know I've reported on them at past shows. Like I went to one convention years ago where they didn't leave room for you to get out from behind your table. So you literally had to get on all fours to crawl under your table. And I remember saying, like, maybe they didn't intend this. It's a small thing, but there's something kind of humiliating about having to crawl under your table on all fours.
It's
right?
Humiliating. It may not be usable or accessible depending on your population, depending on your body shape, depending on your condition or abilities or different abilities, right? I mean, it could be utterly like a threshold you can't cross. And so inherently someone designed that experience not for your behaviors or not for your condition.
Right. And then conversely, I remember going to other shows where a simple thing like the organizers coming up and saying, hey, we made you a sandwich, or we got you a sandwich. Here's a sandwich. Thanks for being a part of this thing. And I remember it just felt so good to feel like, oh, my appearance here matters to you. We've never had any exchange before, but because I'm here and because I'm participating in your thing, you're thanking me with something as simple as food, right? But it went a long way, and it was one of those things where I made a note, and I'm like, if I ever run a convention, the artists, everybody who participates, they're gonna get fed somehow,
It's the sandwich signal, and it's a good metric. You gotta when you experience this, it's worth tuning in, and you're like, you know what, this helps the sustainability, and clearly there's consideration here.
But yeah. So, and then as you point out, it's multiple personas. It's like, how do we make an event that's successful for the people who are coming to the thing to like experience the comics, And how do we make it successful for the cartoonists? How do we navigate that? And there is a tension between it, right? There's certain things you have to be careful of, like, for instance, ADA compliance. Right? We have to make sure there's a certain amount of space in the aisle and there's a certain amount of space for egress, right? And sometimes in navigating that tension, the public is going to win over the comfort of the cartoonist. Maybe this is a little tighter for the cartoonist, but it's a decision we have to make in that, right? So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, all the constraints lead to some kind of trade-off.
Yep.
And
great way of saying it.
Yep, that's part of designing.
Okay, lobbing it back to you.
Uh-oh.
Talk about grabbing all these data points. How are you collecting them? What is there any method that you use to, like, collect and evaluate all these different data points?
Well, let's see. It depends on what role I'm playing in designing the service. I think journaling is a great catch-all, and not a surprise for listeners of this podcast, but having some kind of note of, like, this is working, this is going well, or I've got this really gut reaction to a thing. It's like someone came up to my table and was able to, and this thing went well, this thing didn't go well.
Yeah. Every year after a 2CAF, the organizers all get together and we have, like, sort of like a debriefing, right?
That's huge.
Yeah, and we have it really soon. Like, we try to have it as soon as possible after the event so that everything's still fresh, but with enough distance so that there's a little bit of time for, reflection, like internal reflection and processing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, every year we try to sit down, or every day we do sit down and everybody talks about how do we feel it went? What are some assumptions that we're making about how this or that went? If this didn't work, why do we think that it didn't work? How might we try to adjust for it next time? Right?
Are you kind of connecting dots between sort of like, oh, I heard this, but then I saw that?
Yes. Yeah. So,
okay.
like, that's another thing that we're doing as well, and that's another thing that we try to triangulate things. Did you see that? What was your sense of how things felt in this room or that room? Right? So it was not to just simply just assume that, well, nobody got hurt, let's just keep doing what we're doing. What did people say to us? Kind of like anecdotal evidence do we have? Are there any things we saw happening that are exactly what we wanted to have happen? Are there any things that we saw happening that we don't want to have happen again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then asking why. Why did that happen?
What led to that?
Yeah, what led to that? Let's see. So what about sort of you might not be service-minded if...
Yeah, if your porch falls down and
you might not be service-minded if... I don't know. Sorry. My southern accent and terrible generalization. What was that comedian?
Jeff Foxworthy?
There you go. Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big deal like 20 years ago. Yeah.
I know. That's great. I'll watch new things someday. In the meantime,
in this episode of Rob's Pop Culture Debt, we explore how he doesn't know any stand-up comics outside of Jeff Foxworthy. No, but what about you? Before I started picking on you, you said you might not be service-minded if what?
Well, okay. So I thought you had a cool prompt. So it's like at a cocktail party, right?
Okay. Yeah. This is one that I use all the time. This was by Tim Street, Tim Street on Twitter. Video producer. He used to be part of a podcast called This Week in Media, which for a while was like my absolute top-notch, number one favorite show because it was just like 4 media producers sitting around philosophizing on the future of media. It was super great. And so this is an old quote. This goes back maybe like 5 or 6 years, but he was trying to explain Twitter to somebody, and he said, Twitter is a cocktail party. And at a cocktail party, you don't just walk up to people and hand them your business card and say, call me. You listen to the conversations happening around you, and you listen for how you can help them. How can you be of service? How can you contribute to the discussion? Do you have anything useful to add to this discussion or situation? Beyond actually, beyond well, at my school we do this. Do you have something substantive that can be of assistance to them in the question that they're trying to navigate? If so, then get involved, right?
Okay. So the idea behind this, I'm trying to think of some framing, and then I may go into some devil's advocate stuff.
Please.
How do you, okay, so your intent. Okay, I like the idea of sustaining this kind of thing that I like to make, and I want to be service-minded. I feel like when I spend the resources to go out and market, and when I go out to provide the thing I make, that's high pressure. So, I gotta make some hay. You know what? I've put so much into this. I got to this convention. I got to this event. I got to this party. I got to this any kind of thing where all of a sudden there's me, and I'm here with this, essentially this sort of, hovering entity, ghost Pokemon of my project that I want to be like, I choose you, project. Every conversation, I'm going to choose my project because that's going to help the people, and I want them to think of me and throw money at me, right? Like, isn't that like what this is all about?
I will counter that question with, and this is on the ground stuff because we're actually talking about technique here.
Yeah, totally.
Does the value exchange, or must it happen that night? Is it essential that you get some kind of handshake agreement on something that evening? Yes, you invested money and time and resources into being at that particular function. Do you have to close the deal that night, or can this be the preliminary pitching woo with a potential partner for follow-up later?
So relationships don't always come to fruition, so to speak, on the initial meeting.
I have experienced love at first sight with certain people with whom I've collaborated, where like I talk to them for 5 minutes, and I'm like, you got something that I need to be close to all the time. But I didn't say that. I didn't say like, oh my God, I put my hands on their shoulders and like, we're going to do everything together, even though that feeling was there, but
I've been waiting to hear that, honestly.
I didn't name names.
No, I know.
Because I love all my friends equally.
Totally.
No, but what I'm saying is like, I get that. I understand that feeling, and that feeling can be like really real and very hard to resist, especially if you're like, an especially like outgoing person. But what?
Yeah, good point. Honestly, like your makeup is a big component of this whole situation, right?
Right.
And it's really good to be aware of that.
Yeah, and like when I get around people, especially when I get around like people who I consider my people, in that they make comics and they try to tell stories and they struggle with all the same stuff I struggle with. Rob, you've seen me. I get exceedingly buoyant when I'm around my people. I get really, really, really happy. And so I can come on kind of strong. As a matter of fact, I know that at a convention a couple years ago, I was having dinner with a bunch of cartoonist friends, and they sat me down next to somebody and they said, oh, you need to talk to this person. Cartoonist, does graphic novels that I really enjoy. And they're like, he really likes Transformers. And I turned to him and I felt it happening. And I was like, there was this voice in me going, don't do it, don't do it. And I went, blah, Transformers, I love them so much. And I saw him kind of going, oh, like I came on really strong. I didn't mean to, but it was like I was in the moment. I was really happy, and somebody said Transformers.
The passion horse is like just turning around, and the wisdom rider is like, whoa, whoa, and the horse is like, no, kicks you off, and you're like no, when the horse is like, I'm all about this.
And it was totally one of those things. Like
That's
even while I
wonderful.
was going, I was looking around the table and I saw people giving each other worried looks, and I'm like, oh, I did it again, sucked all the air out again. But so yeah, I know.
Baloney.
Anyway,
but fair enough.
My point is that yes, to build on your point, your makeup figures into a lot of this. So let's say you're the opposite end. Let's say you are very withdrawn, maybe even awkward, and then you're going up and you're doing the Ralph Wiggum, and you're saying like, so do you like stuff? That gets harder.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This behavior, thinking of this criteria, if you're a Ralph Wiggum, you can essentially just speak to that. It's like, I am pretty sure that this is going to help you with finding characters that are all about the showing that like they really actually know more to the adults than it really seems. And then that they are emotionally capable of all these things, and so but what you're doing is picking points that you've thought through that they're relevant to your audience and who you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
Especially when it's the whole feelings, behaviors kind of thing.
And for me, this is a lot easier now in person than it is online still. But
fair enough, yeah.
But just for a variety of reasons, which we've covered in a lot of different shows, but I do want to address this whole notion of, if you're not the most gregarious person in the world. You told a story recently off mic. We don't have to go into details, but I just want to capture that one thing about how you knew when to engage when you were at a function with other people at it, creative types, and you knew, like, okay, this is the moment where I can actually do something.
Wow.
Or if you could characterize that moment.
Can you help me a little bit more than that? Let's see. So how do I know that in general?
They were looking at they were looking at their portfolio.
So to not speak in generalities, they were looking at their portfolio.
You really don't remember what I'm talking about?
No.
Oh, okay.
Offhand.
I don't want to go into it any further because I don't want to dig up something that's like something you don't want to talk about. Not because it's bad stuff or anything, but because it's too personal.
So okay. But the idea is someone's looking at their portfolio.
There was a moment when you heard them say, you saw somebody who had like terrific skills, like really great design skills.
Oh my gosh. I have a couple of these.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Oh. I don't know if I'm picking the right one, but like okay. Yeah, I was sitting in the airport after an event and it just turned out. Yeah, this is probably not the same one.
No, it's not, but keep
look on your face. I was sitting in the airport after an event and someone else from the event is there. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to go sit by them in the terminal because somehow we're on the same plane. And this person, like, I didn't fully appreciate the depth of, like, their passion for, like, storytelling and sort of expressive comicking of characters in various in any situation. And but I knew, like, okay, they really cared about the topic, so it was fun to just talk about comics. And all of a sudden they're like, there's this thing I've been collecting these things that I make and whatever. And then they handed me a stack of some of, like, what I would consider in the upper best of stuff I've seen, right? Like, pretty amazing things, right? And I was like, I just was paging through and being honest and reacting. So one of these moments, this is the kind of moment when someone hands you something and they're like, yeah, it seems like they haven't showed this to everybody or whatever. And to me, it's natural to reply in a naturally positive critique mode, where it's like, if I don't have a lot to say, I'd keep paging along and then react to the positive thing. So like like basically handing something to me is like handing something to a badge machine, gamification, right? Where I'm like, you know what? Badge, page, turn the page, badge, right? And so I badged this person a few times and was like, holy crap, overall reacting to what they shared. And realizing that this person didn't probably do this to a wide audience. And like, why? And for that interaction, I just essentially thought like, well, you should really share this work with a wider audience, and it's pretty great. And I think you will hear other people react the same. So it was this extreme opposite of the extrovert, intense sales. And the thing is, there's salespeople who have lots of skill that don't feel like they're imposing anything because they're just reminding you of what you already think and feel. But like then there's others who are like imposing, and there's a lot of friction. It's like, wait, no, I don't feel that. Stop being convincing. This is annoying. Take that brochure and go away, you know? But then there's other folks that are like so quiet and they're like, they don't share that thing that they make. And inherently, they are making a thing and not getting that feedback, even though it seems to be imbued with the assumption of, well, this is meant to serve an audience. Mm-hmm. So somehow, in some test, big or small, it's time to like get that out and see how it goes. And overall, anyway, I've seen this person, you know, share stuff over Twitter and whatnot, and it seems like it's a positive signal overall. But you know, it's hard to be like instantly. I don't know. Changing pretty established habits and whatnot. So I don't think they've really reached out to a wider audience yet. But I think they've gained some audience, which is cool. Cool to see.
So how did you know, like at what point did you know that this is somebody, like the initial question was, like, because I think you characterized two different worldviews there, but I want to drive at this notion of sort of building on the cocktail metaphor of listening until you hear, oh, that's the thing I can help with. 'Cause I think that's the trickiest part for me, is listening. Yeah.
Dude, I think I realized that there's two, like just right now, there's two ways of not listening. There's ways of not listening and being in people's faces, and there's ways of not listening and not being in people's faces. Where you can be like, just sort of, oh, you're all sheltered in and doing your own thing and drawing in a secret way. Yeah. And expressing whatever you're creating in a secret way. And yeah, please react some more. What do you think?
Well, yeah. And then there's the persona of, boy, I got to be charming because this night's important. I got to turn it on. Flip up the collar, Rob. Flip up the collar.
Flip the collar. They got the alligator on their shirt. Karate Kid music plays.
Oh, that's a dated reference. But
I know.
But okay. So the other story that I was hoping you would tell is when you were at a mixed group and you saw two people talking about somebody's portfolio. They're flipping through their portfolio, and you were at a distance. You were just listening.
Right. Yep. Gotcha.
When did you know this is the moment I should come over and start engaging?
Let's see. I think it's appropriate to explore that depending on the context. So the social context was, I think I remember the example now, by the way, that it was a community event where,
right. Interacting with one
people
another
were,
is like
yeah,
an expected
people,
behavior.
yeah, interacting and sharing. It's like, well, okay, someone is sharing to someone else, and it's work related to this sort of context. Hey, I'm curious. Why not? What do you know? How's this going? And yeah, then I guess so I felt like it was appropriate to ask, pretty early on when it was demonstrated that there was a yeah, this is a thing, part of this event. So
Gotcha.
it was essentially sharing a portfolio from one person to another on a smartphone. I said, hey, can I come over and like check that out over your shoulder, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was fine.
Now, what I think is interesting about this particular story is you didn't know this person.
Nope.
So, like, when you continuing with this cocktail party metaphor, now we may be talking about literal parties, we may be talking about literal gatherings, but this is also about just like engaging with people with which you want to do trade or some kind of service. And service doesn't necessarily mean making something for somebody, like an audience. It can also mean, how can I assist this person in their endeavors? Like, how can I work with an editor? How can I work with a collaborator on a project? How can I work for a client? Right. This is part of this skill set of like identifying when you can help and when it's not, when you have nothing to offer, or whether they have anything to offer you. But good and common advice is, if you want to engage with somebody, you should research them. You should study up on them so that you can be aware of what they're doing. So when you get engaged, so when you start to chat them up at a cocktail party, you can talk about specific things with them. But this is a situation where you know nothing about this person, right? I'm
Right.
curious, on the ground, I'm curious, did you have, or were you aware of any criteria that you were looking for to react to? Like, did you have any way of like investigating the thing with that person?
Other than the initial, okay, I can see you're sharing this in this context, and then I asked if I could be part of that sharing, and was totally open to that not being the case. Turns out it was, and that was fine. And so let's see, it's this progression, and then and my intent, I guess, underlying is to learn and explore and find like, not that I have a like this giant open set of resources to commit, but like, maybe I can help. And what was interesting is this person shared their thing, I reacted, and then later on shared that they were interested in trying to test their art in a different context. And I thought, oh crap, I can help with this context.
Aha. Okay. So
Yeah.
it really was just listening and reacting.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. There was no strategy. There was no like, oh, I'm going to look for these things, and if I don't find these kinds of things, we have nothing to talk about. Right?
I mean, one is a form of creative effort that has a lot of constraints. That's fine. But like, another form is like, well, less constraints. Seeing like, well, is there anyone that I guess I'm open to collaborating with in the right context? If this comes up, I want to explore, right? It doesn't mean like we initially then signed a contract to then, make 10 things together or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it was like, well, this is interesting. So let's just talk about that.
I think part of the recipe here, at least from my experience, is you have to learn to be genuinely interested in other people, and I think that's a learnable skill. I don't think this is something that like you have to have a certain disposition for. I think you can learn how to ask the right questions to get people to respond in a way that creates interesting, I don't know, places to go, things to think about.
I can confirm it's one of the things that could actually help so much it hurts. As far as just being curious about other people,
Yeah.
it can help you stay in the background. It can help
Yeah.
you. Like
Yeah.
you know, it's worth watching that one. But it's but it's very very much a service minded thing, because what is what's this person sharing, and why, and what are they seeking to do, and just sort of sitting back and absorbing. um, it means you're not presumptive and prescriptive about, I said to myself I would do these 3 check boxes at this event, and I'm going to force that. And connecting with a lot of other people really isn't, I don't know, it's not like a thing you can just sort of easily deposit in these check boxes.
Right. Right. That's not something you can measure easily. Did I connect with people this weekend? Well, I gave business cards, you know.
Yeah.
Shook a lot of hands, told a lot of jokes, you know. Maybe. You know,
Mm.
yeah. I don't know. Like I said, like I've had moments where I meet people at events and I'm like, I need to get in this person's orbit somehow because what they're doing is really interesting and I know I have resources that would be beneficial to them. Um, so,
And is that a foregone conclusion? So once you've decided that, how does that pan out?
right. So, yeah. So not every time because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it results in deep lasting friendships and sometimes it results in, well, we like a lot of the same stuff. Our approaches are very different or
Hmm.
what we want to make right now just isn't matching up. I want to make this, you want to make this. That's kind of the same thing, but not a lot of overlap there. But we'll continue to say nice things about each other online. You know, um, I hope that doesn't sound too crass. I mean, it's
Well, in the umbrella of making a service, I mean, you don't exist on your own. Other people
right,
are making their own services, right?
right,
And so you're coexisting with different constraints, different approaches to meeting those constraints, and yeah, that the fact that they may not align isn't inherently something negative. It just, there are different strategies, different approaches, different motivations.
yeah. Well, I think another good episode to go back to sort of give it another extra dimension of this is the episode we did with Ryan Estrada about showcasing yourself, because that
Oh.
was really about like sort of like an on the ground approach to thinking about ways to clarify your message as to what service you do have, what value and service you can provide in a way for people to come across, right? So this is less about you going out and telling people about it, but more of like creating a little place for people to stumble across.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put that in the show notes. Showcasing yourself. I forget what the rest of the title was, but Brian Estrada episode. By the way, can we talk about that? We should wrap up pretty soon, but
Mm-hmm.
um, we should give a plug to this. I'm gonna pull it up right now. You know about this, Rob? Brian's new thing.
Yeah.
Ryan Estrada, our Obi-Wan Kenobi ghost, he's got a Kickstarter. 5 days to go at the time of this recording, so it's almost done. And he looks like he's got like a little under $1,000 left to raise on it to make this thing happen. And it's called Big Data, and it is a radio drama or radio show, I should say. It's not necessarily a drama, but it's a show. First of all, I'll lead with the headliners. He talks about, Paul F. Tompkins is in it, Cecil Baldwin, Jermaine Clement, and this kid. I'm in it. I play a character in this radio drama. I play a guy who loves apples. But what the premise is that Ryan found out that there are 7 keys to the internet. Did you know about this, Rob?
Are you talking about the main DNS servers?
I believe
Or
so. There's
okay.
like 7 people who have to meet every 6 months to like keep the internet running, and like they're scattered all over the world. And so he
Hmm.
wrote a play about what would happen if somebody staged a heist to get the 7 keys to the internet. And it's called Big Data. And it's on Kickstarter. 5 days to go. I really want to see this thing happen. So please, please, please go support whatever you can to make this thing happen. And I know the ending. The ending is amazing. It's a really cool play. So, and plus it's Ryan. So it's Ryan, guys. Ryan Estrada. So.
Yeah, this is cool. I'll have to read it. It sounds awesome. It looks like it's it's based on reality, and it sounds pretty darn intriguing.
So, is there anything else to talk about in this whole thing?
Inherently, yes. But I mean, I think we have explored what about, is there something you want to emphasize? Maybe after our final.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have final thought in a moment.
Yeah.
A final thought in just a moment, and let me pull up. I didn't actually pull this up on the computer yet. What was it? Lean Into Art on iTunes.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you listen to our show and you get value out of it, and you don't have the resources to support us through Patreon or through purchasing a workshop or by getting Rob's video game, This Dash Panda, or by coming to A2CAF, a free thing you can do right now is go to iTunes and give the podcast a star review. You don't even have to write a full review, but if you do, you'll be in good company. We've got 31 reviews in here. People like Marshall, Calmplex, said some really great things about the show. We appreciate those written reviews, but you don't even have to do that. Just give it however many stars you think it deserves. That helps more people find the show. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, a great thing you do right now is give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That helps more people find the show as well. That means YouTube is considered, the second most important search engine on the internet, Rob? Is that still true?
Yeah, I have not. It's really up there. I don't know if it's the second, but people use YouTube to just find lots of stuff. I think anything ranging from like, how do I comb my hair, to how do I unplug my sink?
Yeah. Which, that's true. I've searched for at least one of those things. So that helps more people find the show if you give it more ratings. That shows that it's more useful to the people who engage with it. So if everybody who watched it gave it a thumbs up, that would give us an enormous boost in ratings. So it takes only a few seconds of your time, just hit thumbs up and move on. And we appreciate the heck out of you doing that. And then one more time, I will point people at the Patreon, patreon.com/leanintoart. And there it is. There you can get a show called Extra Lean, which we record in between these episodes. Yes, the Lean Into Art cast is only every 2 weeks. But in between, we do a show called Extra Lean, where it's just us sort of riffing together. If this show is sort of like our concert, Extra Lean is our jam session. That's like listening in on us in the garage trying to figure out a song together. And sometimes it's very clunky and awkward and weird, and other times it's just like, whoa, we just made magic today. But it's a lot of fun, and it's an audio-only show that you can find at patreon.com/leanintoart. And then I hope that if you can, you will consider supporting us there as well. So, did I miss anything, Rob?
I don't think you did. It's really awesome, though. Any of those things are great signals that it's great to understand that folks appreciate what we're making, and that it's a way for us to notice what you're reacting to. So and getting
that
ratings.
Leads to final thought.
Okay.
Final thought is calls to action, right? What we just did was both a functional part of the show, but it was a modeling exercise of this idea of a way to find out whom you're serving is to ask who's engaging with your thing. We do that with Lean Into Art, right?
We do.
And we do it with the Galaxy of Super Adventure podcast as well. We actually call the section action items, right? We have a section of the show and we listen for it throughout the show where it's like, okay, what's something that people could interact with on this show? And like, I'll say something stupid. Like one episode, I said, like, oh, there could be some snobby guy wearing a hamburger T-shirt, and Ben and Zach were like, what does that mean? I'm like, they got like a snarky T-shirt with a hamburger on it, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And so then the action item became design the guy with the hamburger T-shirt, and we got people interacting with the show that way, and we found out more about them, through that interaction.
Which, okay, yeah, that. I guess that what that shows is an openness and a curiosity, where what are the folks showing up to be near the thing that you're making? Like, what are they about? What are they thinking of? What are they reacting to? And finding ways to listen is, I think, immensely beneficial to help hone what you're making.
Yeah, art sound off. Right? Like finding out what people had to say about like the challenge itself, reacting to one another, reacting to things we said during art sound off. That was fascinating,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it involves making something separate but related about the thing, and some podcasts do like T-shirts or like we will do art sound off. We've done it for 2 Novembers in a row at least, and or you'll do like a Patreon, or you do like you sell a thing or whatever, and you see what people are reacted to, and paying attention to that. It's so easy to, like, I think, be satisfied with the making of the thing, but to really serve the thing, it involves showing up and being curious. That somehow you're tuning in to, like, what's the experience like for people to notice that you made this, and then what do they do to become involved in it. And that could mean like the stuff in our call to action, or could mean buying the thing that you're selling, whatever.
Man, like a pro, like you've done this a couple times. The whole idea of like wrapping it all up and recontextualizing it and putting it in like a more broad, accessible terms than the specific example.
Your high five touches my heart. Thanks.
All right. Let's go home, Rob. Thanks, everybody, for downloading, listening, and watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks. If you miss us, check out our Patreon where you can get extra lean. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to kill the stream, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yes, thank you. Goodbye.